Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, that's Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we've got a Samantha or Great show lined up for you. Samantha Williams is on the pod today, and I am so thrilled to have a bit more of that young perspective, which I've promised you and will continue to deliver on, including some more MTCA alumni coming after the break. Stay tuned. Today, Sammy and I get into learning grace and authenticity while at pace, making connections that pay off during school, embracing your imperfections in school and out, navigating work while in school, booking work, that is, the search for community as a young professional, Samantha's reaction to See Our Truths, and navigating institutions as a young BIPOC woman. We continue our discussion of navigating type and the stories Samantha chooses to tell. And she ages herself by not recognizing MmBop, which was a little embarrassing for me. Before we get into that, just a reminder of our upcoming break, which I mentioned, that's after next week. For those who listened to Molly's episode last week, that's Molly Horan from NYU, I talked about us taking a 6-week break of a kind of summer break while we ramp up some exciting fall episodes. We'll still release episodes during the break, and I'm going to give you some new intros at the top so I can still hop on and say hi to all of you. But if you haven't heard all of our artist episodes, this will be a good chance to kind of check out some of the star episodes from our archives from last year. Speaking of last year, I was just reflecting. I'm recording this on Tony Sunday and thinking back with such fondness to the craziness that was last year. Last year, we were like attending the Tonys with a month-old baby in a hotel across the street. My parents had come up. You know, we had a documentary crew following us around. It just felt like a whirlwind. And boy, that feels a long time ago. But today, my heart is going out to all the nominees, especially those who don't take home the prize, which is more of the nominees than not. And it's just also really exciting to see our industry picking itself back up and moving forward from where it was 1 year ago, and certainly from where it was 2 years ago. So I'm just sort of sending some hope that that progression can continue, and that come next year, we're going to be even in a better place in all of those ways. All right, let's get into this episode with Samantha Sammy Williams. Well, we are so excited to have Samantha Williams on the pod today. Samantha has a BFA in musical theater from Pace University. She's been on Broadway in Carolina Change and Dear Evan Hansen, also the national tour of Dear Evan Hansen. And Samantha and I have gone back and forth trying to schedule this. First, I was sick, then she was like the podcast of destiny. We're so excited to really have her on. One of the many reasons I'm really excited to have you on, Samantha, is I really want to keep having more young perspectives on the shows. Like, I love, talking to Elizabeth and talking to Anna Lee Ashford and talking to Gavin Creel, but I do think you are much closer to the age group of many of our listeners than they are. So I'd love to hear a little bit of perspective and ask the same first question that I ask everyone as they come on the pod. After how you do, and we'll do a little how you do. I'd love to hear a little bit of your perspective in terms of what this process was like for you when you were 16 and 17 years old. Because I think often we hear like, I did 2 schools out of a catalog, right? But you're probably now a little bit younger. I'm hoping did more than 2 schools. We're going to reveal this answer in a second. But first off, how are you doing? And then let's get into a little bit of taking yourself back to 16, 17.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Yeah. Okay. So my college audition process, well, I went to a performing arts high school in Houston,
Uh-huh.
and they really helped me figure out what I wanted to do and if I even wanted to do this as a career. And they showed me that it was actually a possible route to go into.
Do you remember your thinking back then in terms of what was the consideration? I sometimes will ask our students of what's your mission statement? What do you want in a college process? What were you considering as you looked at BAs and BFAs, and am I going to study musical theater now? Am I going to study musical theater at all? What was that like
Yeah.
for you as you were considering it?
Yeah, it was really, I'm a really indecisive person. So, it was really hard and kind of stressful for me. I remember at that time, um, because I was also really into science. I come from, my parents are both physicians. So, I maybe wanted to go that route as well. So it was just very, which way do I want to go? What is the right way? And
Mm-hmm.
I just had to come to the conclusion that any path or any like way you choose to go is okay.
Mm.
And like in that moment, it is right. And also just allowing myself to understand that I was so young. I'm still so young. And I have the privilege to change my mind
Mm-hmm.
anytime that I want to. And
Mm.
that was very freeing for me.
You mean that this wasn't a permanent choice, that you're not going, if I choose now at 17, I'm locked into this path for,
Yeah, no.
yeah,
Yeah, it was just what I wanted to do at the time,
yeah.
and thankfully I still like doing it, and thankfully I'm getting paid to do it, but
Mm.
like if I ever change my mind, that is okay.
Yep.
And coming to that conclusion was very, very good for me.
And what did that
Um,
look like in terms of like the list itself that you came
yeah.
in with? So like, and you may not remember every school on your list, but do you kind of remember like, hey, I looked at a bunch of these kind of schools, were you thinking about New York City schools specifically? Were you thinking about conservatories, more liberal arts programs? Do you remember kind of some of that consideration for you?
Yeah, I remember I felt like if I was going to study musical theater, I wanted to be in the city
Mm-hmm.
because I've always wanted to be in New York and I come from Texas, so I needed to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And so Pace was really high up there on my list. Um, and so was I remember I did Pace. I think I did Otterbein.
Mm-hmm.
I did Carnegie, which I did not get into, which was
No shame, no shame. We love the school though.
love that school though. And just like maybe two others that like aren't even like that big of schools. I don't know. I was so young, so I just kind of like did whatever I could, and then I
Uh-huh.
did some normal schools like Boston University, and I did UCLA, and then when it came down to it, it was either like go to UCLA for
Uh-huh.
or
School
go
meaning
to
like maybe major in theater, but not study musical theater, or maybe not even major in theater.
no, probably major in like biology or
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
something, and like also do like a minor like musical theater or something like that.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
And when you say
Um,
call Boston a normal school, because just to confuse the people who are thinking, what's a normal school versus a theater school?
oh
Do you mean
yeah,
that you applied to
sorry.
BU not as an acting major?
Yes,
I
yes,
see. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
great.
And
Because it's a very
so
abnormal school. They're all abnormal schools. We wouldn't
yeah,
want
they're
them
all
anywhere
yeah, of
normal.
course. And so then I remember I had to choose like my choices. I like narrowed them down to either Pace University for theater or
Mm-hmm.
UCLA,
Mm-hmm.
and I honestly really felt comfortable at UCLA. Every time I went to visit, I really loved like the idea of having a campus and
Mm-hmm.
just that like world. But something about like being in New York and like doing the thing was
Mm-hmm.
more intriguing to me. And I knew that I still had so much more to learn about acting if I wanted to really pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to just go to Pace.
I love it.
And that's just kind of how it happened. And
And
yeah, I'm really glad.
you mentioned your parents so it seems like they were financially supportive of you at this moment. Were they emotionally supportive? That's the wrong word, but emotionally. But I mean, were they like, were they cool with like, hey, whatever you want, it's your choice? Or were they like, we really think you should go to this kind of school? How were they involved in the process for you?
Yeah, I mean, my mom is super supportive. My dad, not so much, just because, like I'm also a first generation American. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
going to school for musical theater is not,
It's not the best
uh,
ROI decision if
yeah,
you're trying to make
yeah,
a smart investment. Sure.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but it worked out for me. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're the exception that proves the rule. But
yes,
so dad was maybe not such a fan of the idea of going to school for musical theater.
no, not at all.
And is he now come around once he gets to see you on Broadway? Is he like, well, maybe it's not so bad?
Uh, you would think, but not really.
We
Yeah,
had,
it's hard being an artist.
our very
Yeah.
first artist guest on the show, Telly Leung. He said it was like his 13th Broadway show before someone, or whatever, I don't know what the number is, but it was very deep before his parents stopped asking him when he was going to go to grad school. That even like
Yeah.
after 2, 3, they're like, okay, but now when are you going to get serious and get a real
Yeah,
job?
that's how it is for me too. That's just how it is,
We love it.
unfortunately.
So you ended up going to Pace. Tell me a
Yes.
little bit about the experience of what school was like for you. We'll get a little bit into booking work. So maybe before we get to the booking work section of it, which is awesome that it happens, but in those first couple of years of what was Pace like for you?
Yeah, it was so fun. I mean, I grew so much there, and I was so what's really cool about like going to theater school is that you get like there's a group of friends waiting for you,
Mm-hmm.
like all your classmates and stuff. So it wasn't too crazy of a shift because obviously coming from Texas and then moving to New York and being alone there at like 18 can be
Mm-hmm.
really scary. But I felt immediately like I had support, and it was truly so fun. We had ballet at 8 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday,
Mm-hmm.
and just like it was always just go, 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 go.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the best. I mean, I had a really good time at Pace. So,
What do you feel like as an artist? What's like the biggest thing that you take away from school? Like, what's the thing that you're like, I use this the most, or I'm so grateful I had this training because it set me up for what
oh
I'm doing
yeah,
in shows?
yeah. Well, what I love about Pace is just like their networking that they have, and so
Mm-hmm.
like for me, one of the biggest takeaways was like to always be just gracious and yourself, no matter who you're around,
Mm-hmm.
because that is what's going to get you far, and that's what's going to make people want to work with you. And I really learned that because my freshman year they brought in Janine Tesori as our artist in residence,
Hey now.
and we did a workshop of Caroline or Change, and I played Caroline, and it was awesome getting to work with her. Then she became sort of like a mentor for me, and then I got to do the show on
So cool.
Broadway as Emmy, and like I feel like Pace like planted that seed for
Uh,
me,
no doubt.
and because of what they taught me to like always be kind, always be gracious, always be yourself,
Uh-huh.
I felt like I was able to maintain relationships in the business that helped me as soon as I graduated. So yeah, I feel like just like the Pace's whole thing of like being the most authentic version of you always is
Mm-hmm.
what really has gotten me through.
Let me ask you an impossible question. This is just
Hmm.
not answerable, but well, just for the listeners out there who are thinking like this way, because they'll hear a lot of stories about, oh, I just like did a class and we worked on something, and then oh my god, I made a connection, and how that ended up being my agent, or that ended up being whatever. Right? What part of you at that moment is conscious of, oh my gosh, this is Janine, sorry, this could be a great connection for me and I want to impress her, versus
Yeah.
what part of you is like a student just here learning and taking part in the class? Like, I guess, how do you fight those demons of, I don't want to
Yeah.
like show off, but
Yeah.
I do want to book from this person. I do want to impress this person. How
Of
did you
course.
navigate that yourself? Obviously you did it well.
Thank you. I I didn't really know who she was, to be honest.
It helps. It
It
helps.
really helps. I don't know who most people are, which really helps me. But also,
Mm-hmm.
like that aside, like I don't know, like everyone is just a person, and like
Mm-hmm.
I also always think like, and this might be controversial, but like when you're in school, and
Mm-hmm.
like you're allowed to mess up, you're allowed to be messy, and when you're out of school, you're also allowed to mess up and you're allowed to be messy. And that's why we do this. That's what
Mm-hmm.
acting is. And the minute you try to be perfect, you won't, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just like reminding myself to always like just allow myself to be what I am in that moment. Um, but honestly, at that point, like I didn't know who she was. And I was nervous, obviously, because
Right.
like this is someone from the outside world coming into our class. But when you're in the bubble of like school,
Mm-hmm.
everything kind of feels like school always. So like
Mm-hmm.
to me, she was like a teacher that was brought in. But
Yep. You're
yeah,
just there to learn. I love that.
yeah,
Well, it's so funny you said school feels like school. So something I often ask of artists who went to New York City schools is like, how do you avoid the temptation of New York City and auditioning and the real world right there and the business right there,
yeah.
and potentially they can come see your shows, and just what that feeling is of already being connected. But to you, it wasn't just a temptation. If I'm correct, tell me if this is wrong. But you booked Dear Evan Hansen while still in school. Is that true?
Yeah.
So tell me about that. What was it like to be now in school and trying to navigate? Do I jump? We just this is now maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, as this episode is being released, had an MTCA student who was at CCM, a freshman at CCM, who just booked the national tour, also of Dear Evan Hansen, if you can believe it,
Mhm.
right? And making that same decision of do I leave school? Do I take, that stuff is hard.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what that experience was for you as
Yeah.
you were auditioning and booking.
Yeah. So I had the head of my program, a lot of my teachers invited like industry professionals and just like casting agents and stuff to our workshop of Carolina Change without telling me, thank God, because I was just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And from that they would send me, I got like some audition appointments and stuff, and I started auditioning for Alana Beck.
So just for the
Uh-huh.
sake, this is great, but just for the sake of our listener maybe who don't know the business as much,
Oh
what does
yes,
that mean?
yes.
So in terms of, talk me through some of the mechanics of, so some humans, and you can tell me who those humans are, but have come to see you in a show. What does it mean now they're sending you out on appointments? How does that work? Are we talking about
Yeah.
managers, casting directors who are reaching out for you? How is it actually happening in terms of
Yeah.
you getting in the rooms?
Yeah, so it was mainly casting directors. I think a few people from Tara Rubin's office were there. I think they must have been because
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who called me in for Evan Hansen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and basically, they came to see the show, and then they would email. They got my information from my program head, and they would email me and uh, see if I would be interested in auditioning for certain things in the business, and give me appointments so that it wasn't like
Yes.
I was waiting in line or anything like that.
I love that. So that's the casting director doing it. So at this point, you don't have an agent manager sending
No,
you out on stuff. They're just
no, no.
directly to the cast director. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Hmm.
Okay, so then now you get to the point of booking, or maybe before. When does that conversation go of, oh my gosh, maybe do I need an agent? Do I need a manager? How's this going to happen? Because you're still 21 at this point. You're still a young in school person.
Yeah, I think I was like 19 actually.
19, unbelievable.
19 or 20 or something
Okay,
like
great.
crazy like that. So
You can't even drink, and
I,
you hear you are booking Broadway shows. No
yeah,
big deal.
I know my 21st birthday I was in Dear Evan Hansen.
Too
And I
cool.
remember I was like, okay,
What
cool.
is
This is
life?
wild.
Yeah.
Um, but so basically what happened was I was going in for Evan Hansen for like, I think I had like 10 auditions, like something crazy. And um, I ended up booking the new Toronto production that they were doing in
Mm-hmm.
Canada of Evan Hansen.
Mm-hmm.
And I booked the understudy for Zoe and Alana. And the head of my program was like, I don't think you should leave school to be in Canada to do
Yes.
this. And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, what if I never get a chance? I was young, whatever. Um, but she knew. She was like, no. I, and so then she was like, let me put you in contact with an agent from Buckwald.
Mm-hmm.
And she like sent her some materials of mine. They signed me, and then we got to working on the contract. And
Mm-hmm.
the agent was also like, you know what, like I don't think you should leave school for this. So I decided to stay and not leave school.
Mm-hmm.
And then literally like 2 weeks later, they called me, and I remember Terry Rubin's office called me, and they were like, hey, like we saw that like you didn't accept it. Was it because it was an understudy, or was it because like you didn't want to leave school? And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, like I didn't want to leave New York to go to Canada to do that. It had nothing to do with it being an understudy or anything like that. So then I was offered the vacation understudy on Broadway literally the next week.
Just bumping it up.
um,
They're getting a
yeah,
little more excitement for you. Okay.
yeah. So it was a vacation understudy for like a week and a half.
Uh-huh.
And what they do, and now that the show's going to close, I can just say like what they do at Evan Hansen is like a lot of the times, because we're so young, they'll like being a vacation understudy is like a test trial to
Uh-huh.
see, especially if they're going to replace someone or something.
Uh-huh.
So I was the vacation understudy for Alana, or for somebody who was an understudy for Alana.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I learned all of Alana's track. I was on Broadway and like couldn't tell anyone. It was like really weird.
Mm.
And yeah. And I was still doing school at the same time. And it was fine because like I wasn't going on, I was just there.
Uh-huh.
And it was only for like a week and a half or something. And then at the end of that week and a half, I went into a room with like Michael Greif and like all the producers and did all of Alana's material the
Uh-huh.
way that I learned it from the vacation understudy
Mm-hmm.
process. And literally like a few days after, they were like, okay, you're Alana Beck on Broadway. And
Unbelievable.
so I went from literally being asked if I wanted to do the understudy in Canada to actually being the role on Broadway in a
Which
matter of like 3
we
weeks.
sometimes talk about the power of no. Good thing you said no to that first one.
Yeah,
Often it's like we want to say like, don't be picky, take the job. But then the flip side of that, of course, is in this case, your pickiness got you an even better job.
yeah, yeah.
But now you must be now navigating this with school. So obviously they let you be the vacation understudy. They had the conversation of, is it worth it to leave school? How does, because each school works differently in terms of some will say, sorry, if you miss classes, you're going to fail. And so you
Oh
can
no.
take time off. But how does that work in terms of Pace being able to say, yeah, we'll let you miss this class as an excused absence. And how are you're
Yeah.
probably getting a little behind on class time. How does that
Oh
working
yeah.
now as this is happening?
Oh yeah. I mean, like they're putting a bunch of like they're asking a bunch of like young 20 somethings to study theater in New York City. Like they know that like at our age we're very marketable, like
Hmm.
this is going to happen. So they were so encouraging and helpful, and like I was never really behind because like me being at rehearsal for the show counted for something, you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? And they were really nice and helpful. Like everyone was super supportive, and um the conversation of whether it's worth leaving school was not so much like they wanted me to like stay in the program for their own selves. It was
Hmm.
mainly for my own, like they knew
Right.
that I something bigger was waiting for me.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think they did a really good job at like they do a really good job at helping students that are working in the business graduate on time, and also like they work with you. It's not
Hmm.
like they leave you out to dry, especially like they're the ones who kind of like brought them into my world,
Right. You're like, you
you
asked me to do
know?
this and I did it and I
Yeah,
did good. I booked it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know.
But then how does that work? So then you're doing it on Broadway and you're about to do the tour. I'm not sure the exact timing of it. How does it then work with graduating school? So they're just allowing that to be credit hours, or then do you come back to school at some point? How does that work in terms of you have a BFA? At least I said it in the
Yeah.
bio. I hope it's true.
Mhm. It is true.
Mhm.
So basically, so this happened my junior year, and in the contract, it said you have to be on Broadway for 6 months, and then you have to do the tour for 10 months.
Uh-huh.
Because they already had a pre-planned switcheroo where they were bringing some of the tour people to Broadway.
Hmm.
I didn't really want to go on tour because I just like I don't know. I like to be in New York and like do my
And you also were
thing.
just on Broadway. It was like, it's tough to go back and be
Exactly.
like, I just did the thing and now I got to go do the thing somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, I still accepted the contract because, like, I'm, you know, there's always ways out of it. So
Hmm.
I accepted it, and then I was doing. So it happened the end of my junior year, um, second semester junior year. So that's when I was doing Broadway through the summer, and then in the fall would be the beginning of my senior year,
Hmm.
and that's when I was supposed to go on tour. And so I took like a leave of absence from school
Uh-huh.
for like the first semester of my senior year. And then during that leave of absence, I booked Carolina Change, even though I was on tour for 2 months.
Uh-huh.
And so I left tour, came back to the city, started getting ready for Carolina Change. And while I was doing that, I was like talking with my advisors about like figuring everything out so that I could finish, you know?
Hmm.
And then the pandemic happened. So then I went home. I went home and to Texas. And my mom obviously was like, well, open your laptop.
You
Time to get to Zoom.
might as well finish up school while we're here. Let's
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
So I finished school with my class on time.
Hmm.
And then I came back and then did Caroline. So
Amazing.
it kind of worked out
Oh,
in a
don't you
weird
dare.
way.
For those not looking at the video, Samantha put her hand over her heart going, I'm kind of embarrassed. The pandemic was good for me. It was
I
cool.
know,
How
like,
dare you?
yeah,
How
obviously I was also, going
Yeah.
through it,
For a
but
pandemic, yeah.
it it helped in the sense that I got to graduate on time and
Because otherwise it might have been tricky for you to finish with your senior. You might have had to take a semester off and then come back for a semester. You might not have been able to
yeah,
make it work if you're coming back to Carolina Change to also
exactly.
get the credits you needed.
Yeah, I definitely was able to I made it work. It worked out for me, and I don't think it would have been as easy had I have been still working in the
Mhm.
city and stuff. Because then you're like, well, what's the point? I'm already doing what I would get a BFA for. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
But it was really important to my family that I had a degree, so I was able to get that, and
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. I'm gonna ask you another impossible question, which is just looking back, is there anything that you feel like you almost regret about what is missed of like a normal college experience?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
this is something so cool. I mean, you're such a mature young adult, and you're still very young, of course, in the grand scheme of things. But like, is there something about like, hey, what if I'd gone to UCLA and gone to frat parties and I don't know what people do in normal. I went to BFA too, so I don't know, But like,
Yeah.
is there some part of you that like that goes, being pulled especially so quickly into the business and then having to miss school, even just with my other BFA classmates who also were maybe doing some of this stuff that,
Mhm.
so I guess, yeah, what does it feel in terms of what do you wonder about or what rankles at night as you go, I kind of miss this experience?
Yeah. I definitely am not I don't regret anything because I am so grateful for the position I'm in right now, but I definitely would have loved to have a campus experience and I
Hmm.
would have loved to go to frat parties and I would have loved to do intramural sports and stuff like that. Like it's definitely I don't know, I always wanted that
Hmm.
and I made the decision to go with something that would fast track me by living in New York, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? But there's definitely a part of me that's like, damn, like I really missed that. And then also leaving school early as well.
Yep.
Um, I missed also nobody talks about this, but it was really lonely to
Hmm.
be on Broadway and move off of I still was living in the dorms by my school and to move into an apartment by myself and
Hmm.
be on the other side of Manhattan while all my classmates were in school together.
Hmm.
That was really hard.
Yeah.
And it's a dumb thing to complain about to some people, but when you're in it, people understand, it's
Yes.
hard to be away from everyone. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say regret. I don't regret anything, but I do now that I'm older, I definitely understand the value of being on a college campus. Like all my friends who went to UMich, their college experiences are just so
Yeah.
different from
Football games and yeah.
yeah,
Totally.
and I just noticed something about my friends who went there. They're just a lot more open to other experiences that aren't just musical theater
Hmm.
because they come from a world where musical theater is just one of the majors in a giant university. You know what
Uh-huh.
I mean?
Right.
So I think it just depends on what somebody wants at that time. But
Yep.
yeah, I think I would have. I'm lucky. I think I would have really enjoyed that. But I'm happy I chose what I did.
Yeah, I do feel like it's something so many adults, musical theater or not, are searching for the community they found in college. And so in some ways, like it's like the community experience, we have it as artists as we do shows. You have this amazing, oh my God, my family, my show family.
Yeah.
But it lives for however long, on Broadway, maybe it's a
Yeah.
couple of years, but often it's a couple weeks, a couple months of a time of a period of rehearsals and shows, and you're so incredibly close and then you go away. Right. It's like that sense of community that most people really only have in their life for those 4 years of college where they go, these are my frat brothers. I don't know why about frats. That's not about that. But, the thing of like what it is to go, we are all in this dorm. I love that you talked about that, like what it is to be in this dorm and then on these like sad boxes alone in these
Yeah.
apartments. And often people get almost a whole year after graduating to deal with that. But you had to deal with that like while in Broadway, while doing you didn't get to process that at all because now all of a
No.
sudden you're thrust into having to perform.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and also what you said, I in college I didn't get that like super campus feeling. But
Mm-hmm.
for some, like as soon as like I started Evan Hansen, I made a bunch of friends on there, and we
Mm-hmm.
were all young people coming up together, kind of having similar experiences. And like you said, like each cast really does become like a family if you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I feel like with my shows, I've gotten to have like that collegey experience. Like even now, I'm here at the Goodman in Chicago, and like it feels like I'm at summer camp because they
Mm.
have me in this apartment, and like we all my cast lives here, and we all go to work together, and then we
Mm.
hang out after work. It's like it doesn't get better than
So
this.
fun.
I
I
feel
know.
like I'm getting my college experience right now.
Totally. And for those not watching the video, we were talking when Samantha first signed on. She's in this like gorgeous palatial, I guess, actor housing. It's like this, like she looks like she's in a celebrity, video of like, yeah, cool. I got my guitar stand in the back, and I have this
I'm
lounging
dead.
couch and all this. It's amazing. Okay, so but before I want to talk a lot about Carolina Change for sure.
Hmm.
We'll get into that on the second half of the show, but I want to talk a little bit about CR Truths. From
Yeah,
pace. And now, of course, I want to do this delicately, since, of course, everyone has their own perspective, and I really don't want to kind of put you on the spot and
of
feel like you're
course.
throwing anyone under the bus, right? We hate the bus, as
Yes, I
but
do.
I'd love to start with, for those who have watched the videos. Do you feel like, personally, do you feel like they're a fair and accurate representation of pace during your tenure there and or now, based on what you know now? I'm not sure of the exact timing of when they came out and where you were in school at
Hmm.
that moment.
Yeah, I feel like most of those videos came out during the pandemic. So I was home and I
Mm-hmm.
was a senior in college. And honestly, like everyone's experience is so different and still so valid. So I think that it takes a lot of um, courage to get on a video and talk about
Mm-hmm.
your experience so candidly, especially in this business, and especially being young and feeling like if you say one thing on the internet, it'll last forever. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And I think there are definitely uh, aspects to it that I didn't necessarily experience, but I don't want to invalidate anyone's experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if they felt strongly enough to talk about it online like that, it had to have been true. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah.
And what about if, just for our parents and students who maybe haven't watched the
Mhm.
videos, who maybe know what we're talking about, even, is this
Yeah.
something, would you recommend, hey, go watch all the videos, go watch one video? I think it's certainly some question we got a lot in those years after they were released of like, should I watch them all? Is this what this program is like? Is this what all programs are like to some extent? Right. There was a lot of those kinds of
Yeah.
questions. So
Yeah.
what would you recommend, either people, for students who are looking at PACE or who aren't specifically looking at PACE? Would you recommend parents and students do go and watch them themselves?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if I'm going to be completely candid, it, I feel like Pace right now is in a like a rebuilding
Hmm.
moment of finding a new program head and finding new teachers and stuff. Like when I was there, I had a great time,
Hmm.
and we had so many like connections and networking, and it was really awesome. But like right now, I feel like they're restarting from scratch, which is great. And I
Uh-huh.
think really important for them and for alum who experience um, things there in the past. So I think it's really great that they're doing that.
And certainly not unique. I mean, there's not the only program that had some shakeup during the past 2 years. I mean, I think
Hmm.
some of it specifically to some of these issues that are brought up in those videos, but some of it also just due to aging faculty, and they use this moment to go, let's evaluate our curriculum, and while we're doing
Yeah.
that, what are we changing? I mean, so there are a lot of programs, that a lot of new program heads at really big schools. I mean, it happens always, but especially the past couple of years has been a big turnover.
Yeah. I think, yeah. And also, like, a lot of what made Pace so great is the networking
Hmm.
and the connections that you get going there. And I feel like right now they're still kind of rebuilding those networks and those connections and then
Hmm.
finding new ones. And I would just give it like maybe a year or two, if I'm being
Hmm.
honest.
What if I
I
were to
don't know if we should keep this in there.
yeah, we'll see. What if
Samantha
I were
Williams
to
bashes pace. It's not what I mean
new
to
video?
do.
That's the headline that'll come out of this podcast is, yeah. What if I were to broaden this question a little bit? We didn't talk about it, of course, when the first question I asked you was just about your mission statement. But as you're kind of looking at a scholastic experience, especially being a young BIPOC student, was that a
Mhm.
consideration for you as you're looking at schools of like, where would they have the resources and or desire to speak toward your identity specifically? Was that something you were looking at
Yeah.
as you evaluated schools?
Honestly, no, because I was so young. I didn't
Uh,
understand the importance of all of that
um,
yet. Now I think kids are a lot more woke and are looking at that kind of stuff, which they should be, because I only had like two teachers of color my entire two black teachers my
mhm,
entire 4 years there, which is completely unacceptable.
mhm,
And the curriculum wasn't necessarily catered toward me.
uh-huh,
So I feel like now that's a really, I wish I knew more about that and cared at the
yeah,
time, but I didn't. So like I feel like now with what's going on in our world and how um, sensitive and aware we've all become
uh-huh.
over post pandemic, I think like it's really important for kids to look at that, especially when they're looking at schools.
What about now? So using the wisdom of your still very young mid-20s
Hmm.
self or whatever, but especially as you see schools and institutions speaking a lot of value statements into the world, right? A lot of promises to
Hmm.
do better. And there have, of course, been some real drastic changes some schools have made. Some have spoken about changes that are coming.
Yeah.
How are you evaluating these words and actions, right? Like, this is a question I ask every school. For the first 20 episodes of
Hmm.
the podcast, I ask, like, what are you doing? And I'll tell you, I get a lot of platitudes back. I think I get a
Hmm.
lot of like, just truthfully, I feel like I'm meeting the school's bureaucratic team as opposed to these
Yeah.
people. In that moment, they go, all right, I've got this question, I've prepared my statement,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I want to, without sort of being like, here's my thoughts on it, here's what I think. For the students who are hearing that, I do feel for them because I go, I'm
Yeah.
not sure I'd know how to evaluate what this person
Hmm.
said versus this person and what does it all mean. So I guess what
Yeah.
would you be looking at as you're going, this feels like it's real action and these are words that make sense to me, or these are words that I would say it's not as exciting to me.
Yeah. I mean, I would just really be aware of faculty and who is actually on their team,
Hmm.
because I don't like if it's just a bunch of white people telling you that they're going to try
Hmm.
their best not to be racist. It's not going to, it's not
I'm
really,
really going to try. No, I'm really going to try.
yeah,
I'm going to try
yeah.
my
And
best.
it's also just like, like you as a student, you want a well-rounded experience. And the only way you're going to get that is if you go, if the schools provide a well-rounded faculty and well-rounded
Uh-huh.
teachers and diversity, like it's just so important. So I think receiving, I even now, like I receive that within companies that I work for,
Hmm.
and all of that stuff. There's a bunch of stuff like that. And honestly, like Caroline and this show are like have done such a great job at not only speaking it but also like putting it into action. Like
Hmm.
here we have a diversity inclusions like somebody like on the team that works for DEI, and she's in every rehearsal and she's always talking to us, and
Hmm.
she always has something to say about this is a new musical, so we're uh we're like figuring out family dynamics, we're in a
Hmm.
biracial family, like there's a lot going on, and like we have somebody there facilitating those conversations, and like it's an actual thing. So I feel like a lot of colleges and institutions are, they have all this stuff on paper, but they don't really like put it to action. And I
Hmm.
think that's, to bring it back, I think that's one of the big issues. That's one of the big things that Sierra Truths was talking about, is like
Hmm.
you say all this stuff, but like we're not seeing it,
Right.
you know? So I just think that for young students now and for parents too, looking into colleges, like just be very aware and do your research on what they have done and what's on the horizon for them in terms of diversity and inclusion.
I love it. Okay, we will take a short break. We'll get into some lighter topics moving forward, I promise. On the back end, we'll talk a little bit about Carolina Change, and we'll play a little bit of a game also with
Yes.
Samantha. We got to play our games.
Can't
So
wait.
we're back in a flash. All right, we are back with Samantha Sammy Williams. We've done the first half of the pod, so now I'm going to call her Sammy.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you booked Carolina Change pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And then did you even start rehearsing it? And then it went down, or you were about to start? You were in rehearsal.
Yeah.
So what was the experience, I guess, for you personally first? What was the experience of like sitting on, oh my gosh, I have this exciting role in a new Broadway show, or at least a remount of a Broadway show.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then coming back to it, and will it come back? I'd just love to hear a little bit about that for you.
Yeah. So yeah, we were supposed to have our first invited dress, and then everything shut down.
Oof.
Um, but I remember when I like got the news and I got it, it was like this whole thing, and I was so happy, and
Mm.
it just like such a full circle moment getting to do the show again, and after having it be like my first show in New York when
Mm-hmm.
I was a freshman in college, and
And for those who aren't tracking, this is Janine Tesori, who became a mentor to
yes.
you, and now you get to, actually
Yeah.
work with.
Yeah, and I remember the audition process was so tedious. There was only 3 auditions, but they were lots of months apart. So,
Uh-huh.
um, but it was, yeah, I was so excited, and the rehearsal process was awesome. I was getting to work with like Chip Zion and like all these, and
So
Sharon D.
cool.
Clark and
Mm-hmm.
Casey and all these people, and they became my like family and my stage moms, and it was awesome. And then the pandemic happened, and I was so bummed out, but I I knew that this show was going to happen. I just had a
Mm-hmm.
feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I just took the time at home to reevaluate,
Mm-hmm.
and I came back, and the second time around was like a million times better than the first time around. So,
Because you did
uh,
a whole new rehearsal process the second time around.
yeah, sort of. We had like about, I think, 3 weeks of
Yeah.
rehearsal. So basically, and it was like there was just this level of ownership to the work
Uh-huh.
that within everyone
Because
that
you've been
wasn't
stewing
there.
on it for 2 years. It's
Yeah,
just been marinating or whatever. But
yeah,
did
and
the show
also
make
just with
any
everything. Yeah, go ahead.
did the show make any changes in terms of like, especially like now, in I think a lot of shows as they're coming back now in the wake of some social movements that happened during the pandemic, we're like, how can we be relevant to this? And now you're doing a show that is very specific to, I guess, a time period, but to some of these movements. Was that a
Mhm.
conversation in the room of like, are we adjusting anything, or are we, in terms of, or just now look at all these things that we're saying, which are pretty relevant right now? Like, how was that addressed in the room?
Yeah, it was mainly like look at all these things that are so relevant,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the whole statues and honestly
Mm-hmm.
just everything. So there was just like, I don't know, there was like this fire that was underneath everyone that just felt like we really understood that we were doing something so important to like the world. Like making art that like really like means something
Mm-hmm.
in the moment. So yeah, it was crazy. It was awesome.
And I will say, very important to me personally. I did see the show. You were fantastic in it. And it was the
Thank you.
first date that my partner and I went on after our baby was born. So like we did the
Oh,
Tonys, but the Tonys wasn't really like a thing, because the Tonys was like, she was 5 weeks old and we were so stressed and we were breastfeeding in the middle of the Tonys. But this was like a
yeah.
full date. We like went to dinner, saw a show, did a
Oh,
full, and it
yay.
was a great date. It
Yeah.
was a great show. It was a great experience.
Thank you. Yeah. It was awesome. I loved like every second of it, and the creative team was so nice, and just like I don't know, it was like a dream experience. It was
Mm.
awesome. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you more tough questions. This is
Mhm.
some lighter than before, but still tough. I would love to
Yeah.
talk about type a little bit, because
Mhm.
I've been trying to kind of weave a little mini series of conversations about type with
Yeah.
some of our different artists. And we've had a number of different kinds of people talk about different types of people, if I dare say it, talk about type.
Absolutely.
So our listeners will have heard me say, and we're just going to assume I'm right about this because it's my podcast and I'm an expert on the college process, so I say, but that in the college process, type is something that should almost be completely ignored in favor of your authentic self and individuality. That's how the vast majorities of institutions approach it from a non-commercial and artistic
Mhm.
perspective. They're not like casting their classes,
Mhm.
right? So, But that said, in the commercial business, I do think it's a trickier thing. It's more of a conversation in that there is this moment of the old world and the new,
Yeah,
maybe pulling in different directions. And maybe so I just
absolutely.
love to have like, what was your experience with type from school and into the professional world? Is it something you consider on a daily basis? Did you consider it a lot at a certain point?
Yeah.
How does it factor into your thinking?
Yeah. Yeah, I try not to even consider it, to be honest. I know things that don't resonate with me. Um, so I guess and I know what I don't like to do, but I
Hmm.
I don't know, I just feel like there's definitely the type of like young person and like there's the black girl type and like all these boxes that, we have created because theater, like there's like the stereotypes and like things that like are what make theater honestly and like how it started and but I feel like now I don't know, it's just like nothing I've never really I try not to focus on that because I feel like it limits you and there are
Uh-huh.
stories that I don't resonate with and there are characters that I don't resonate with, but I wouldn't say that I will never be able to. I just don't right now. So
Totally.
who's to say?
And do you consider, so I love that thinking of it in terms of what stories do I want to tell? What stories do I want
Yeah.
to represent? Do you consider that, from and it seems like maybe the answer is no from a more commercial
Yeah.
perspective, but do you consider like, hey, I've just played this in Dear Evan Hansen
Uh-huh.
and now I've done this in Carolina Change. Do you consider like, hey, I want to kind of tell other kinds of stories,
Oh,
or it seems like I've been storing similar stories, or even it could be about kinds of shows. Like as you're considering your career and maybe
yeah.
talking with
Yeah.
representation, how do you consider that
Okay,
kind of
yeah, yeah,
stuff?
yeah. So yeah, I guess in that sense, the type that I play right now is like teenager, like young
Right.
person, but I feel like that just has more to do with that I am young,
You
Yeah,
young, you
exactly.
are
And like,
young. Yeah.
yeah, so that,
But also no. I mean, you're even, but you're also you are young for your age. I
yeah.
mean, the experience of when I saw you come across, I was like, wasn't she 17? Like I did have that feeling of like you playing the part. I thought you
Yeah,
were in high school, not
exactly.
I thought you were in
Yeah.
college, right? Like you do come off on stage
Really young.
very
Yeah,
young.
yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah,
guess in that sense, like definitely. Um and in the sense of like just stories and things like especially with my managers and agents, like of what we decide to do next and stuff like that, I feel like, you know, in terms of like like theater or film, I try to go into film more and like TV film and
mm-hmm.
like dabble in that more. And in that sense, I've just kind of been throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks.
That's right. Yeah,
But in theater, I feel like I am at a place where I can be a lot more selective. And I've been trying to just do things that are good because I find that that
that are
is
good.
very hard to find.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's mainly just like, is the material even good? And then
Uh,
from there, I keep looking at it. But yeah,
I love that. Well, and I do think that is really smart to certainly think about, is this good material? I mean, it's kind of maybe old world and old school thinking, but sometimes, from that young, from being seen as young, there is an instinct, and maybe it's something that will happen to you
hmm
once you're no longer being cast in these young parts, but there's an instinct to go, man, how do I get the business to take me seriously? Or how do I get the business to
yeah,
see me as I'm deeper than just the young ingenue, or I'm
yeah,
deeper than just the sweet. Yes, I play that, but also, it's like, is that something that at some point you may consciously consider?
yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, I think if something is well, in my opinion, I think if something is well written, you'll be seen as deeper than the young ingenue
Right.
by
You're bringing
doing
that
it.
to
You
it.
know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah.
Uh, I feel like that was how it was for Carolyn, and I also feel like, especially for the show I'm doing right now, like it is like I am playing a teenager, but it's so well written and
Yep.
so good that like you can't help but take it serious. So I think if the
Hmm.
story resonates is well written enough and resonates with enough people, I think you're fine in that sense.
All right. Not to keep hammering
Oh,
on you as
I
a
love
young
it.
person. All these questions are about
It's
youth. It's
okay.
unbelievable. It makes me feel old. But can I ask, like, when you think about older actors in those families, even you kind of said, this person's more of my stage
Yeah.
mom, or they're sort of like these elders that are in your cast. I'd love to ask, what do you wish that older actors understood that you're right about? So like
Mhm.
if you've experienced any clashes between old hands and young
Yeah.
whippersnappers, what are you like? My generation is right. The people that I was saying with Dear Evan Hansen were having the same experience. When we sit around and we're having a couple,
Yeah.
drinks or whatever, we go, I know I'm right. And they could learn from me
Yeah.
about this.
Ooh, that's a really good question. Because I feel like I learned so much from them, but
Well, I'm going to ask you that question too. I'm just
yeah,
giving
no,
you
that's
this one
such a
first.
good question. I think God, I don't know. I think, oh, okay. I'd say that, uh, right in like, I feel like my generation is learning that, like, especially in theater, like, you don't have to say yes to everything. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
back then there there was
Mm-hmm.
definitely more of a pressure to like go to auditions where the show was bad and you actually didn't want to do it. And like now,
Mm-hmm.
like even though it is a privilege to do that, obviously my class or my friends who are working and doing the thing as well, like they understand that like there are certain things they can pass on, and I feel like the older generation didn't really get that as much,
Mm-hmm.
so I'd say that.
That is a really smart, and I've seen that in many different manifestations. So certainly the business side of things in terms of like what, doing roles or saying I'm
Mhm.
not available, or some of those things that people go, you can't say that,
Mhm.
they'll give the part to someone else or
Yeah.
whatever. But also just that iterates out into the rehearsal room,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
sometimes, where it's like even questioning the directors of like, I think old people might say like, hey, young whippersnapper, just try it before you like resist the
Yeah,
note,
of
is sort of
course.
the negative side of it. But you sometimes see some of that, like the confidence of your
Yeah,
generation,
there's more.
which, yeah, people, they're like, I watched that out of
Yeah,
myself, whatever, that sense of self. I said, oh yes, sir, I'll totally do that.
exactly, exactly.
Okay, well, give me the flip side then. What's something that you feel like you've really learned
Oh
from the old
god, I've
hands?
learned so much from them.
All right, give me 7
Oh
things then.
my god. Uh, I learned so much from them. I feel like I can honestly go person by person. I feel like okay, so like Casey Levy taught me
Mm-hmm.
that like you can have a family and still do this, and you
Talk
can
about it.
also like it doesn't have to be your entire world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she really taught me how like what it looks like to be a leading lady, and like just the things that you do that like you don't learn unless somebody tells you, like
No
the
doubt.
opening night notes, and just like
Uh-huh.
how to treat your dresser, and just like certain things like that. Like she taught me so much about that. I feel like Chip Zion taught me how important humor is, and
Hmm.
also he taught me that like the artist struggle is never over, even when you're like 75. Like you're
Hmm.
still gonna like wonder if this is even what you should be doing, even
Mm-hmm.
though you've made a whole like crazy career.
He's still thinking about going to grad school is what you're
Yes.
saying. So his parents are
No,
still saying,
literally,
yeah, Chip, when are you going to get a real
literally.
job?
I remember like I knew like it's just so crazy to me. Like he's Chip Zion, but like he is so like he's such like just a person, and like
Mm-hmm.
he he's truly like became one of my best friends, like which is so
Hmm.
crazy. It just shows that like there there isn't always a gap if you're just like a good
Yes.
person. So um
Mm.
yeah, he just taught me that like the work never stops. Like you're always going to be like there's always going to be doubt, but like you just got to like keep going if you love it enough. And
I love it. That's enough.
yeah,
You
I
can't do
can't do
more
more. I
lessons
can't
unless
do
it's
more.
you could
I
do
mean, like,
19
yeah,
lessons of
they're
this.
gonna. I'm gonna send them this clip, and they're gonna cry. But
Aw. All right. Well, then you can do some more. We won't put it on
yeah,
the
no, no,
pod. Well,
no, no,
afterward,
no.
we'll do some like
Yes,
PS
by the
post notes
way,
where you can
no,
say
no,
all
no.
things.
But yeah, I learned a
Um,
lot from those people.
okay, this is going to lead us into our
Mhm.
game. I need you to explain to me the Caroline or Change title. So, like, is it a Sophie's choice between herself and the
Mhm.
change? Or is it a choice between like the social change the world needs or her humanity?
Yeah,
Right. I'm like, we spent maybe 45 minutes at dinner trying to be like, what does the title Caroline or Change
yeah.
mean?
So actually, like, I have the answer. So
Oh my God, I want it. Give it to me.
basically, I remember Janine told me this one time. She was like, it's like, so like, the show is either called Caroline or it's called Change. It's like one of those
Mm-hmm.
titles. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, like the goat or who is
yeah,
Sylvia or whatever. You're
exactly.
saying like
That's
two different
two
options of
different
things.
options. That's what
Uh-huh.
that's what the title is.
Uh-huh.
Um, and in a different world, in a different like iteration, the show could also be called Caroline or Emmy. Like so, like the change
Mm-hmm.
is Emmy's story and Emmy's like
Mm-hmm.
thing that she's bringing on, and I think, and so that is what it is. Um,
Mm.
yes.
I love it. That's a great. I didn't know that you'd have an answer, and that's a great answer. It makes so much sense. It's Caroline is the show or Change.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, we've now beautifully segued into our game.
Okay.
So, as you may know, we play a unique game with each of our
Uh-huh.
artists who come on the pod. This is going to be a very simple trivia
Oh
game
no.
based on your two
Oh,
Broadway
okay.
shows. And this one is called Caroline or Hanson.
Ah.
Okay? Caroline or Hanson. I'm going to give you a fun fact or a quote or a song lyric. This is going to be
Okay.
difficult. All of our games are hard. I'm just, the sweat that's pouring from your face right now is
Okay.
accurate, right? You have to tell me if it's either Caroline, Hanson, or neither.
Oh.
That's what the three
Okay.
options are. It could be from Caroline, Hanson, and you're putting it in the
Yeah.
appropriate group. Make
Okay.
sense?
Okay.
Do you feel ready to
I
play
feel
this game?
ready.
The stakes could not be higher. Here we go. This is the warm-up round, just so that we feel like we're in the right
Okay.
ballpark, right? So let's say if I were to say washing machine,
Caroline.
sure. Arm cast,
Hanson.
dishwasher.
Oh. Hanson. Because they're.
I say
I
neither.
say
Is there a
neither.
dishwasher
I
in
see
it?
what you mean. I
Okay,
see what you
fine.
mean. I see what you mean.
Just for the warm-up round, even though
Okay.
you could make an argument, and you get to overrule me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
You're like,
Okay.
actually, secretly there is a Hanson connection. All right,
Okay. Okay.
okay. Here we go. We're gonna do the song lyric round.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna read you some song lyrics. None of these are your lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna have to tell me which show it belongs to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I stop smoking pot, then everything might be all right. I'll take your advice. I'll try to be more nice.
Hanson.
Great. 100% correct. No one deserves to be forgotten. No one deserves to fade away.
Hanson.
Hanson again. Okay, great. You matter to me. Simple and plain and not much to ask from somebody.
Neither.
Neither. That's correct. Okay. Don't be silly. She's safe and sound. They buried her above the ground.
Caroline.
Okay, great. You're doing
Yeah.
great. Okay. Tanya Pinkins.
Caroline.
Noah Galvin.
Hanson.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Chuck Cooper.
Caroline.
Patrick Rowland.
Is that Will Roland?
Sure, but I made up a name. It's a made up name.
Oh, neither.
I was trying to steal one
I was
from
like,
you.
I don't know
I
who
was
that
trying
is.
to do it.
Oh,
I've never heard of it. Okay, great. All right. We're going to get a little more challenging
Okay, I'm ready.
and a little more esoteric.
Oh, God.
Here we go. I'm removing neither as a category just to make it a little easier for you.
Okay.
It's going to be Caroline or Hanson.
Okay.
Comedy club.
Hanson.
No, it's Caroline. Caroline's is a comedy club. We're getting esoteric here. We're getting funky and weird, Samantha.
Oh.
Okay. Kennedy.
Caroline.
Caroline Kennedy. Very good. Okay. MmBop.
Caroline.
That's Hanson. MmBop, bop, bop. It's Hanson is a group from my childhood. This is how young you are. It's fine.
Oh, okay. Okay. I see what we're doing.
Now
okay,
you see,
okay,
we're getting
okay.
esoteric. Okay, it's the last question. Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. I was helping with all the singing.
Caroline?
That's right. Sweet Caroline.
Oh,
That's 100% correct. That's what we're doing.
Caroline.
Okay. You've done fantastically at the game. There it is.
Okay.
Wait, you know that, but you don't know MmBop. It's embarrassing for me that that's true, but it's fine.
I'm
There's
done.
some listeners, some of our parents are like, oh my God, how dare she? MmBop.
I
Okay.
know.
Let's just do a couple more questions and
Okay.
we'll wrap up. I'd love, while we've got this beautiful youth on, to talk a little bit about your relationship with social media.
Mhm.
So specifically, how do you consume it and then how do you produce on it when we talk
Yeah.
about social media?
Oh God, I'm addicted to Instagram.
Well, there you go.
Unfortunately,
I consume it all the time.
it's horrible. So I only have Instagram as social media. I don't have Facebook or Twitter or
Even though
TikTok.
Instagram is owned by Facebook. So you do have Facebook.
Exactly.
You're
So
part of the meta
I
universe,
am
whether you know
part
it or
of
not.
it. Yes.
Mhm.
And yeah, I really know that I would love to be on TikTok, but I will get addicted to it. So I'm not on it.
Yep.
And so I go through phases with Instagram where like I hate it because I feel like we've gotten to the point in our industry, unfortunately, where it feels like we need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that. Like that
Yep.
just sucks. um, but I'm trying to use it the right way and like
Uh-huh.
kind of cater it more towards like career things and like certain photo shoot like things,
Uh-huh.
modeling stuff, and
Use it
keeping
meaning
it,
what you put out. You're trying to use your platform
yeah,
productively.
use my platform. And then when I scroll through it, I just try to have a good time on it and like look at
This
like,
sounds like a do as I say, not as I do situation. This doesn't
yeah,
sound like you're saying I recommend just like doom scrolling all the time. And
yeah,
we
like,
don't on this podcast recommend such things.
yeah, no. Like, yeah, I recommend just following like accounts that are fun and like bring you joy. But like, I don't think, I think we have the power to not put as much importance into it as some people in our
Yeah.
industry do. And
Is it a conversation you've had with either representatives, or is it ever come up in a casting session that you know of, where it's like, oh man, this one's got 20,000 Instagram followers and this one's only got 5,000? Like,
yeah,
is that something that you have talked about, of a conscious, I want to try to bring up my presence for the sake of, especially I think as a young person, once you're in your 40s and 50s, I think people are not casting,
yeah,
Casey based on her Instagram, even though I'm
yeah,
sure she's a fine
of
Instagram.
course.
But as a person under 30, I think they go, oh, that person does have a huge TikTok presence. That person, it's at least a consideration.
Yeah, it is most definitely a consideration. But I can't bring myself
For
to
the
do it.
audio listeners, that was a shoulder shrug, is what you got. You got a
Yeah,
side eye and a
I'm
shoulder
just
shrug there.
like, I hate it. But yeah, I think yeah, I mean, like, there's just a balance of everything. And it's
Yeah,
unfortunate that TikTok personalities and stuff like that is what is,
I know.
it's,
It's because everybody hates it, but yet we all do it,
we
right? So
all
it's
do
like you're
it
saying you hate
because
it, but you're also addicted to it, right?
exactly. Like I hate that like it matters how many followers that I have now, but like
Hmm.
unfortunately it does, and I don't have that many because I'm
Right.
like I can't bring myself to like self promote like
Yep.
that. But
Yep.
maybe one day I'll book a TV show and get all the followers I need.
Well, no, from this podcast, you're going to get to 30 to
Yeah,
40 followers. I'm telling you, we're going to see in a
exactly.
second.
No, it's
I,
silly, but use it how you will, I say.
my last question is just, if you could give one piece of advice, maybe I'll make it a two-part question.
Mhm.
One piece of advice to 17-year-old Sammy, what would it be? And then the sort of part B of that is, for your parents, if you could give one piece of advice for your parents, maybe specifically your dad, if that was a
Mhm.
more difficult relationship, what would that be? So one for
Ooh.
yourself and then one for your parents.
Okay, so for myself to 17-year-old, the 17-year-old version of me, I would say it's all going to be okay.
Mm,
No, I would say whatever path you end up choosing is the right path in the right moment, and everything will work out for you.
mm,
As long as you're doing what you want to do in that moment. And then for my parents, I would say she's gonna be all right. Trust her. Trust your kids and let them follow their hearts, because I feel like living in capitalist America, like we feel like the only way to get far is by making a bunch of money and doing things that are set for you. But
mhm,
I feel like at the end of the day, like if you're not happy doing it, then what is the point? So
mm,
I would just say, let your child be happy.
mm.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll wrap things up there. We know
Cool.
we can follow you at Saw Me and at Sammy Makes Yummy Food. We got to get those followers
No,
up.
no,
No?
not my food channel.
You don't want your food channel out to
I'm
the world?
dead. I'm laughing so hard.
We found it. We found it
I
on the
am,
Insta webs. We
I'm,
found it.
oh my God, that is
And then
funny.
tell me a little bit for anyone in Chicago. So tell me quickly about the show
Yes.
in Chicago they can
Oh
come
my
see.
God. Come see Life After in
Mm,
Chicago at the Goodman Theater. It is so good. It is one of the best musicals I've ever been a part of, and
Mm.
everyone is so talented, and the set is awesome, and it is just the coolest show. And it is about a girl named Alice who loses her dad and who is understanding grief for the
Mm.
first time in her life, and just what it means to not have everything be in black and white, and what it means to live in the gray. So
Mm.
I feel like everyone can resonate with that, and it is such a good show. And really, if you find yourself in Chicago, come on by.
We love it. All right, so we're going to put that in the show notes. We'll definitely have Life After, a link to that. We'll have your both of your Instagram handles, even if you don't want only one of them there. You're going to get followers on both. I'm telling you, it's happening. Sammy, thank you so much for today. It was
Thank
so fun getting to chat with
you.
you.
This was awesome. Thank you for having me.
MmBop. It was so fun getting to have Sammy Williams on the show. She goes by Sammy, though she was waffling on exactly how to call herself professionally, so you'll hear me switch between Sammy and Samantha different times as we go, kind of catching myself each time that I say her name. I did find her to be so cogent and intelligent, and to have real depth and maturity for a person so young in this process. I just really appreciated she had kind of a really grounded perspective on how she saw the industry, especially coming through a turbulent time. It was exciting to see someone who's really grounded in it and kind of understands what it is. My takeaway today is a short one. I always say that, and then it ends up being normal length, so I'm going to stop saying that. But it's really just to give you a bit of the other perspective on navigating booking work while in school. Sammy actually said it herself, with the idea of maybe turning down the Toronto company of Dear Evan Hansen in order to stay in school. But then I know we gave like a number of examples of people who book and leave. And though Sammy didn't technically leave, she sort of kind of left, planned to leave, but then did finish. So she was kind of an interesting case. But I will just say in general, at MTCA, we are a big fan of students going to school and sticking it out the 4 years and getting that degree. It's not to say, of course, that you can't book work over the summer. We love that. Or specific situations like what Sammy ended up with, where booking work later in your college career maybe allows you to still graduate with some help from the university. But I do think it's worth saying that this is more of the exception than the rule in terms of university participation in booking work, especially if you're talking about something like Broadway where you're doing 8 shows a week. And in general, in most cases, we are going to advise students to stay in school and finish their degree, unless there's an opportunity that is just unpass-upable. But I would say 9 out of 10 times when a student comes to me and says, hey, I just booked this work while in school, the first solution I'm going to try to navigate is without having to take time off, right? Even if that means potentially not getting to do the job, rather than sometimes people think, well, the job first and school comes second, right? That's not how we think of it, certainly at MTCA. We've had instances where people take a leave and come back, but in general, I think the longer you stay away, the less likely it is that you actually come back, and then you often won't get to graduate with your class. And there's some definite downsides to leaving and taking that full leave of absence. A special shout out, though, to my friend Chris Peluso, who ended up going back and finishing his degree at Michigan over a decade later. So, of course, it can happen, and it does happen. I'll tell you, I did book a TV pilot while in my sophomore year of school at Carnegie Mellon. I had like an agent in Pittsburgh from my time in high school there. And it was a really, really difficult situation for me to navigate. It was only like a few weeks of filming. I think it ended up being 3 weeks of filming, but it led to a lot of difficulty, a lot of tension with my professors who all really wanted me to prioritize school first. In fact, came within one class of failing ballet that semester for missing too many classes. And that I got a D, is still the only bad grade I've ever received in my scholastic life. And I still feel it deep in my heart. And I only avoided a similar grade in my movement class by taking 3 classes a day of makeup classes for the end of my semester. So like I would go and take a movement class and then the same movement class again and then the same movement class again. And oh boy, my body was feeling it by the end of that. But Carnegie Mellon's perspective there, and it's one that I actually share now as an adult, is that the priority should be on my education and my degree for those 4 years. That they were trying to help me build a sustainable foundation for my life in the industry, and no individual job was going to be worth messing that up. I mean, of course, these are all decisions that are to each their own, right? And each individual decision is unique. Certainly Sammy booking Broadway is different than me booking a pilot in Pittsburgh for 3 weeks. But I just wanted to be sure that that perspective of kind of the downside of it was on the airwaves as well, that we weren't only talking about the excitement, which of course is exciting anytime you book work in school, but that it is a difficult decision that each person has to make on their own. Well, if you enjoyed listening to this episode on your own, or maybe with your whole family, and you want to hear more, please hit that follow button. Each of you can individually hit the follow button, so we'll get that many more subscriptions. That's what we really want. We'd also appreciate you if you rate and review us wherever you found us. I suggest 5 stars if you're addicted to this podcast, and an ironic 5 stars if you're following us just for fun. You can also reach out to us with questions for the pod at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com, or reach out to me at Charmer7 on Instagram, where I very rarely post, and at Charmer on TikTok, where I will almost certainly never post. If you're interested in working with MTCA for help with your individual prep for your college audition journey, please check us out at mtcollegeauditions.com, or if you just want to Google MTCA, we should come up. You can also follow us on all of the socials media. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, you matter to me. I'll see you next week.